Millionaire CEO waiting for a taxi with his fiancée, shocked when his ex arrived in a Rolls-Royce holding her daughter. Hi, my beautiful family. Welcome back to Mr. Peter's Family, your own family channel. Heavenly God, we come before you with humble hearts. Please cover this beautiful family with your mercy and peace. Pour strength into every home, calm into every heart, and light into every dark moment. Heal those who are tired, lift those who feel unseen, and protect every soul connected to this family. Lord, I especially pray for the women of this family. Give them honor that the world cannot steal, strength that never breaks, and love that never runs dry. They are the silent builders of homes, the keepers of peace, the hearts that carry everyone else before themselves. Bless their health, reward their sacrifices, and surround them with respect, safety, and deep appreciation every day of their lives. My beautiful family, every word I write comes from love and effort. When you stay, when you support, it gives meaning to everything I do. If your heart is true, please like the video. If your love is real, write, "I am with Mr. Peter." Tom Andrews had always believed in second chances, right up until the moment his past stepped out of a Rolls-Royce and looked at him like he was already dead. The afternoon rain had turned the city streets into rivers of grey, and he stood under the hotel awning watching taxis stream past like they were part of some cosmic conspiracy against him. Lucy Hamilton pressed against his side, her diamond engagement ring catching what little light filtered through the storm clouds. She was scrolling through her phone with increasing irritation, her perfectly manicured nails tapping an impatient rhythm against the screen. "This is ridiculous," she muttered, not looking up. "We should have let the concierge arrange a car. Now we're going to be late for the most important meeting of your career." Tom raised his arm again, hoping this taxi would be different from the last dozen that had ignored him. "It's just a few blocks to the restaurant. The traffic's just bad because of the weather." "The traffic is always bad, and that's not the point." Lucy's voice had that edge to it, the one that meant she was keeping score of his failures. "Mitchell Tech is worth millions, Tom. Millions. If we lose this contract because you insisted on being spontaneous instead of planning ahead." "We're not going to lose it," Tom interrupted, though his confidence was evaporating faster than puddles on hot pavement. Mitchell Tech was everything he'd been working toward, a local tech giant looking for consulting services, the kind of contract that could transform his moderately successful firm into something genuinely prestigious. The kind that would finally prove to everyone, including himself, that he'd made something of his life. Lucy was about to respond when the sound cut through everything else, a deep, confident purr that didn't belong in the chaos of midday traffic. It was the kind of sound that made pedestrians stop walking and turn their heads. A Rolls-Royce Phantom, midnight blue and gleaming despite the downpour, glided to a stop directly in front of them like it owned the entire street. Tom felt his stomach drop into his shoes before he even understood why. The rear door opened with that whisper-quiet precision that screamed wealth, and a little girl tumbled out first. She couldn't have been more than early elementary school age, all sparkly rain boots and purple hair ribbons, bouncing with the kind of energy only children possessed. She was chattering excitedly about something involving a dentist and promised treats and hot chocolate with whipped cream that reached the ceiling. "Mommy, you promised." The little girl tugged at someone still inside the car. "You said if I was brave at the dentist, we could get the really good hot chocolate with the chocolate chips on top." "I know exactly what I said, baby." The voice from inside the car made Tom's blood freeze in his veins. It was warm honey and patience and love, but underneath it was something else, something he recognized even after all these years. "But let's get inside before we both turn into soggy messes, okay? Then hot chocolate with all the toppings your heart desires." Then she stepped out of the car, and Tom's entire world shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Darcy Brown. She wore a burgundy suit that probably cost more than his car payment, tailored so precisely it looked like it had been painted onto her body by someone who understood exactly how to make power into fabric. Her locks cascaded past her shoulders in an elegant waterfall that must have taken years to grow, each one perfect and deliberate. But it was her face that destroyed him, those deep brown eyes that used to look at him with such tenderness, those lips he'd kissed until he memorized their shape. Except now, everything about her radiated a kind of strength that made the air around her seem to shimmer with electricity. She didn't just look successful. She looked like she'd conquered entire worlds and was deciding which one to claim next. "Did you see how shiny our car is?" The little girl, Molly, was practically vibrating with excitement. "Isn't it the shiniest car you ever saw?" "It's definitely very shiny, sweetheart." Darcy's voice was pure affection when she spoke to her daughter, nothing like the last words Tom had heard from her all those years ago. Nothing like the coldness he still heard in his nightmares sometimes. "But we need to get inside now, okay? Before the rain wins." "The rain can't win," Molly giggled, jumping in a puddle. "We're too fast." The sound of that laugh pierced something in Tom's chest that he'd thought had died years ago, something he'd convinced himself he'd buried so deep it could never resurface. Darcy's hand was already guiding her daughter toward the hotel entrance, that protective maternal touch that spoke of years of practice. When her gaze swept across the sidewalk in that casual way successful people had of surveying spaces they were about to move through, then her eyes landed on Tom, and the entire universe ground to a halt. The transformation was instant and absolute. Whatever warmth had been in her expression evaporated like water hitting molten steel. Her spine straightened, her chin lifted, and her eyes went as cold as the rain hammering the pavement. Tom watched in horrible fascination as her face became a mask, beautiful and terrible, and completely empty of anything that resembled recognition or care or even basic human kindness. She looked at him the way someone might look at a piece of trash stuck to their expensive shoe, with mild disgust and a burning desire to scrape it off as quickly as possible. "Darcy." Her name escaped his lips before his brain could stop it, rough and desperate and filled with too many emotions to name. Lucy's head snapped up from her phone so fast, Tom heard her neck crack. Her professional radar, finely tuned from years of corporate politics, immediately detected the shift in atmosphere. "I'm sorry, what? Do you know her?" Molly looked between the adults with that confused curiosity children always had when grown-ups started acting strange. Her small hand tightened around her mother's fingers, seeking reassurance in the way kids did when the world suddenly felt unsafe. "Mommy, do you know that man?" The question hung in the rain-soaked air like a blade waiting to fall. Darcy's face could have been carved from Arctic ice. When she spoke, each word was precisely enunciated, deliberately cold, designed to cut deep and leave scars. "No, sweetheart, I don't know him at all." She swept past them without another glance, her heels clicking against the wet pavement with the absolute confidence of someone who knew exactly who they were and exactly what they were worth. Molly skipped beside her, already chattering about something else, her child's brain moving on to the next exciting thing with the blessed speed of the very young. They disappeared through the hotel's golden revolving doors, leaving nothing behind but the faint scent of jasmine perfume and the smoking ruins of everything Tom thought he knew about his life. Tom stood frozen on that sidewalk, unable to move, unable to breathe, unable to do anything except stare at those golden doors that had swallowed Darcy and her daughter whole. He was watching the space where she'd been, trying to reconcile the woman in the Rolls-Royce with the girl he'd left behind, trying to understand how the broken thing he'd walked away from had transformed into something so magnificent it hurt to look at directly. "Tom?" Lucy's voice seemed to come from underwater, distant and distorted. Tom, who was that woman? Why did you say her name like that? He couldn't answer. His throat had closed around words that felt too big and too terrible and too true to speak aloud. Tom! Lucy grabbed his arm hard enough to leave marks, her nails digging through his jacket. Answer me right now. Who was that? The rain kept falling. The city kept moving around them like they were stones in a river. Somewhere a horn blared. A delivery truck splashed through a puddle. Life continued on, utterly indifferent to the fact that Tom's entire existence had just been turned inside out. That was my ex-wife, he finally managed, his voice barely above a whisper. Lucy's face went through shock, confusion, anger, and something that looked horribly like betrayal in the span of a single heartbeat before settling on an expression Tom had never seen her wear before. The look of someone realizing they'd been lied to about something fundamental. You're what? Her voice dropped to that dangerous quiet that was somehow worse than shouting. Tom, you told me that relationship ended years ago. You said it was mutual. You said you'd both moved on and it was ancient history that didn't matter anymore. It was. It is. The lies tasted like ashes and broken glass in his mouth. That didn't look like ancient history. Lucy stepped back from him, creating physical distance that felt like a chasm opening between them. That looked like someone who wanted to pretend you'd never existed. That looked like someone who hates you. And that car, Tom, that suit she was wearing probably cost more than everything in my closet combined. She's not just doing well. She's wealthy. Really genuinely wealthy. Tom wanted to argue, wanted to defend himself, wanted to explain that it was complicated, and he'd been young and stupid and made mistakes. But what could he possibly say that wouldn't make everything worse? Yes, my ex-wife is now apparently worth millions, while I'm still struggling to close deals that might save my mid-level consulting firm. Yes, she looked at me like I was something unpleasant she'd accidentally stepped in. Yes, seeing her just ripped open wounds I didn't even know still existed. Who was the little girl? Lucy's question cut through his spiraling thoughts like a scalpel. And don't you dare tell me you don't know. I saw your face when you saw her, Tom. I saw the way you looked. Tom's stomach twisted into knots so tight he thought he might be sick right there on the fancy hotel sidewalk. I don't know. She must have moved on after the divorce, remarried, started a family with someone else who wasn't a complete disaster. The words should have been a relief, should have been proof that Darcy was fine and happy and had built a new life without him. Instead, they felt like someone was slowly crushing his ribcage. We need to go, Lucy said, her voice completely hollow of emotion. Mitchell Tech is waiting, and you've already made us late with this ridiculous taxi situation. We cannot afford to make this any worse than you've already made it. She was right. They couldn't. Tom forced himself to raise his arm again, to signal for a taxi, to focus on the meeting that could make or break his business. A cab finally slowed, and they climbed into the back seat in the kind of silence that felt like a funeral. As they pulled away from the hotel, Tom turned to look back at those golden doors one last time. Somewhere inside that building, Darcy Brown was probably ordering hot chocolate for her daughter, living a life so far removed from anything Tom had ever imagined that it felt like watching someone else's fever dream. She'd looked at him like he was nothing, like he'd never mattered at all. And the terrible truth that was beginning to settle over Tom like a burial shroud, the realization that was slowly crushing all the air from his lungs, was that maybe she was right. Maybe he never had mattered. Maybe he'd thrown away the only thing that had ever truly mattered, and now he got to spend the rest of his life knowing exactly what he'd lost. The taxi driver turned on the radio, filling the silence with meaningless noise. Lucy stared out her window, her jaw clenched so tight Tom could see the muscles jumping, and Tom sat there feeling like someone had reached into his chest and ripped out something vital, leaving nothing behind but a gaping wound that would never properly heal. Chapter 2. The ghost of what he destroyed. The taxi felt like a coffin, and Lucy's silence was the dirt being shoveled on top. She sat as far from Tom as the back seat allowed, her body angled toward the window, her arms crossed so tightly he could see her knuckles turning white against the dark fabric of her dress. The engagement ring on her finger kept catching the passing streetlights, winking in and out of shadow, like a question that was rapidly becoming an accusation Tom didn't know how to answer. He stared at his hands and watched them tremble. He tried to make them stop. They wouldn't listen. "Your ex-wife," Lucy finally said, and each word was wrapped in so much ice, Tom half expected to see his breath fog in the air between them. "The one you barely mentioned in all the time we've been together. The one you said ended things mutually and moved on peacefully. That was her." It wasn't a question, but Tom nodded anyway because his voice had abandoned him completely. "And the Rolls-Royce. That suit that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. The way she carried herself like she owned the entire city and everyone in it." Lucy's laugh was sharp enough to draw blood, bitter enough to poison. "She's not just successful, Tom. She's incredibly, monumentally successful. More successful than you. More successful than us. More successful than anything you've ever built or ever will build. So I'm going to ask you one more time, and if you lie to me again, I swear we're done. What really happened between you two?" Tom's mind raced like a trapped animal, trying to construct a version of the truth that wouldn't destroy everything he had left. The marriage had been brief. That much Lucy knew. It had ended badly. She knew that too. But she didn't know about the debt that had nearly swallowed him whole, the kind of crushing financial pressure that made it hard to breathe at night. She didn't know about his mother's offer, delivered over expensive wine in a restaurant Tom couldn't afford. She didn't know about the choice he'd made that still woke him up sometimes at 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat and shame. She didn't know that he was a coward. "We were young," he said, the words scraping his throat raw. "I was trying to build my business from absolutely nothing. We were drowning in debt, real debt, the kind where collectors call at all hours and threatening letters arrive daily, and you can't sleep because you're doing math in your head trying to figure out how to pay for groceries. Darcy wanted to fight through it together, but I couldn't see a way out. The weight was crushing me, so I left." It was a half-truth, which made it the worst kind of lie, the kind wrapped in just enough honesty to sound believable, the kind that poisoned everything it touched. "You left," Lucy repeated slowly, like she was testing the words for toxicity. "Just like that. You gave up on your marriage because things got financially difficult." "Yes. And now she's worth millions, probably hundreds of millions based on that car and that suit, and you're—" Lucy gestured vaguely at him, at the taxi, at the mediocre life they'd built together that suddenly seemed so small and insufficient it made Tom want to disappear. "You're here, with me, about to potentially lose the biggest contract of your career because you can't focus for 5 minutes without thinking about her." The words stung because they were painfully, undeniably, brutally true. Tom had rebuilt after the divorce, had clawed his way back from the edge of bankruptcy, but he'd never reached the heights he'd dreamed of as a younger man. He was comfortable, moderately successful, respected in his industry, but he wasn't riding in Rolls-Royces or wearing suits that cost what most people made in a month, or looking at the world like he owned pieces of it. "Who was the little girl?" Lucy asked again, and this time there was something dangerous lurking beneath her controlled tone. Something that sounded like she was putting pieces together that Tom desperately didn't want connected. Tom's stomach twisted violently. "I told you I don't know. She must have remarried after we split up. Had a child with someone else. Built a new life." But even as he said it, even as the words left his mouth, something about the child nagged at him like a splinter under his skin. The age seemed to line up with something he couldn't quite articulate. The way she'd smiled had felt familiar in a way that made his chest physically ache. The purple ribbons in her hair reminded him of something Darcy used to wear back when they were young and stupid and in love. No, it couldn't be. It was impossible. "We're here," the driver announced, pulling up to the restaurant with a jerk that nearly threw Tom against the seat in front of him. Lucy gathered her purse and stepped out of the car without waiting for Tom, without looking back, without any of the small courtesies that usually marked their relationship. He watched her walk toward the entrance, her spine rigid with anger and hurt, every line of her body radiating fury, and knew with absolute certainty that the dinner ahead was going to be a complete disaster even before it started. Inside the restaurant, the representatives from Mitchell Tech were already seated at a corner table, reviewing documents and speaking in those low, professional tones that meant serious business. Margaret Davies, the CEO, looked up as Tom and Lucy approached. Her sharp eyes, the kind that had built a tech empire from scratch, immediately took in Lucy's forced smile and Tom's distracted, haunted expression. She exchanged a glance with her CFO that Tom couldn't read, but definitely didn't like. This was going to be a very long evening. Across the city, in a cafe with floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked rain-soaked streets, slowly turning golden with evening light, Darcy Brown sat watching her daughter create art with the fierce concentration only children possessed. Molly's tongue poked out slightly as she worked, her small hands gripping crayons with the determination of someone creating a masterpiece that would hang in the Louvre. She'd chosen purple for the sky, because regular blue was boring, and boring was for people without imagination, she'd announced, with the absolute certainty of the very young, and was currently engaged in a serious internal debate about whether grass should be green or pink, or maybe both, because who made the rules anyway? "Mommy, look!" Molly held up her drawing with pride radiating from every pore. "It's our house. See, and that's you standing in the garden, and that's me, and those are all the flowers we're going to plant when spring comes. It's absolutely beautiful, baby girl." Darcy's voice was gentle and automatic, but her mind was somewhere else entirely, dragged back against her will to a moment she'd spent years trying to bury so deep it could never surface again. She could still see the envelope on the kitchen table, innocent and white and deadly. Could still feel the way her hands had shaken as she'd opened it, the paper crinkling under trembling fingers that somehow knew what was coming before her brain caught up. Divorce papers, no phone call, no conversation, no warning, no explanation. Just cold, sterile legal language and a note in Tom's handwriting that had consisted of exactly 6 words. "I can't do this anymore." She'd been holding a positive pregnancy test in her other hand. The memory hit like a physical blow, even now, even after all this time and all the therapy and all the success she'd built like armor around that wounded girl. She'd stood in that tiny apartment, the one with the leaky faucet that the landlord never fixed, and walls so thin she could hear the neighbors' arguments word for word, and felt her entire world collapse into a singularity of pain so intense she'd genuinely thought it might kill her. Just stop her heart right there in that pathetic kitchen. Her husband was leaving. She was pregnant. They had crushing debt that would take years to pay off. And she was utterly, completely, devastatingly alone. "Mommy?" Molly's voice pulled her back to the present, to the expensive cafe and the comfortable life and the empire she'd built from ashes. "You have your sad face on, the one you get sometimes when you think I'm not looking." Darcy forced a smile, reaching across the table to tuck a stray braid behind Molly's ear with fingers that only trembled slightly. "I'm not sad, sweetheart. I'm just thinking." "About what?" "About the man who left me with nothing but debt collectors calling at all hours, and a baby growing inside me. About how I cried for weeks until I ran out of tears and then cried some more. About how I worked 3 jobs while pregnant because I had literally no other choice. About how I built an empire from the ashes of what he burned, one exhausting day at a time. About how seeing his face today ripped open wounds I thought had healed years ago." About how lucky I am, Darcy said instead, to have you. Molly beamed with pure, uncomplicated joy and returned to her drawing with renewed enthusiasm, already moving on to debating whether the sun should have a smiley face or not. Darcy's phone buzzed against the table. Her assistant, James, with his usual impeccable timing and ability to know exactly when she needed a distraction. Major deal closing tomorrow. Mitchell Tech choosing their new consulting partner. Final proposal needs your review tonight. This could be the biggest contract we've ever landed. Brown Tech is the favorite, but there's apparently one other firm in the running. She typed back quickly, her fingers steady, despite the emotional turbulence. Send it over. I'll review after bedtime. Who's the competition? The response came immediately. Small firm called Andrews Consulting. Nobody special. Darcy's blood turned to ice in her veins. Andrews Consulting, Tom's company. It had to be. She stared at her phone screen until the words blurred, until her vision went hazy with something that might have been tears if she'd allowed herself to cry. Of course the universe would be this cruel. Of course she'd be competing directly against the man who'd destroyed her for the biggest contract of her career. "Mummy, can we get cookies too?" Molly asked, looking up with those big, hopeful eyes that Darcy had never learned to resist, had never wanted to learn to resist. "Please? I was really brave at the dentist. The hygienist said I was the bravest kid she'd seen all week." "One cookie," Darcy relented, watching her daughter's face light up like Christmas morning. "And then we need to go home. You have school tomorrow, and I have work that apparently just got a lot more complicated." "Yay!" Molly scrambled out of her chair, already racing toward the bakery case with the boundless energy only children possessed. Darcy watched her go. This small person who was half her and half the man who'd abandoned them both without looking back. Molly had Tom's smile, that crooked little grin that used to make Darcy's heart flutter like a trapped bird. She had his laugh, bright and infectious and impossible to resist. She had the same way of tilting her head when she was thinking hard about something, the same unconscious gesture that Darcy saw in her daughter 100 times a day. But she had Darcy's strength, her determination, her absolute refusal to give up or give in or let the world break her. And Tom would never know her, would never know what an incredible, brilliant, beautiful human being his daughter was becoming, would never get to see her drawings or hear her laugh or feel the weight of her small hand in his, would never know that he'd created something perfect and then walked away from it. That was his loss, his punishment, his penance, and Darcy told herself she was glad of it, even as something deep in her chest ached with a pain that had never quite faded. That night, after Molly was tucked into bed in her room, filled with stuffed animals and fairy lights and dreams, after Darcy had read 3 stories and sung 2 songs and promised yes, they could absolutely have pancakes for breakfast. She stood in her penthouse apartment looking out over the glittering city and felt her hands start to shake. She'd built this life, this empire, this future. She'd clawed her way up from that tiny apartment where she'd cried herself sick, from the jobs that paid barely enough to cover rent, from the fear that she'd fail her unborn child before she even got a chance to try. She'd done it alone, without help, without support, without Tom. And seeing him today should have felt like victory, should have felt like vindication, should have felt like proof that she'd won, that abandoning her had been the biggest mistake of his pathetic life. Instead, it felt like someone had taken a crowbar to a wound she'd thought had scarred over years ago and ripped it wide open again. Darcy pressed her forehead against the cool glass of her window and let herself feel it, all of it. The anger that still burned like acid in her veins, the betrayal that cut like broken glass every time she let herself remember, the love that had curdled into something poisonous, but somehow impossibly hadn't quite died. She let herself remember the girl she'd been, the one who'd loved Tom Andrews with her whole heart and believed they could weather any storm together, believed they were invincible as long as they had each other. That girl was gone. She'd died the day she found those divorce papers on the kitchen table. And the woman who'd risen from those ashes didn't need anyone, didn't want anyone, certainly didn't need Tom Andrews disrupting the carefully constructed life she'd built from ruins and rage and sheer stubborn will. Her phone buzzed. The Mitchell Tech proposal, ready for review. Darcy took a deep breath, wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, straightened her spine the way she'd taught herself to do, and got to work. Because that's what she did. She worked, she built, she won. And tomorrow, she was going to beat Tom Andrews so badly he'd remember it for the rest of his life. Chapter 3. The cracks begin to show. Tom had never understood the phrase out-of-body experience until he sat through the Mitchell Tech dinner, watching his career implode in slow motion. Margaret Davies was speaking, her words floating through the air like they were meant for someone else entirely. Something about implementation schedules and resource allocation and projected deliverables. Tom nodded at what he hoped were appropriate moments, acutely aware that Lucy was watching him with the intensity of someone documenting evidence for a future confrontation. "Mr. Andrews?" Margaret's voice cut through the fog like a knife through butter. "You seem distracted. Should we reschedule this conversation for when you're more present?" The question wasn't kind. It was a test Tom was failing spectacularly, and everyone at the table knew it. "No, I apologize." Tom forced himself to focus, to push Darcy's face out of his mind for 30 seconds, just 30 seconds. "You were saying about the timeline. I was asking whether your firm has experience with implementations of this scale." Margaret's expression suggested she already knew the answer and was simply being polite by asking. "Because frankly, we're comparing you to Brown Tech Solutions, and their track record is impeccable. Flawless, actually. Brown Tech Solutions, Darcy's company." The words hit Tom like a physical blow to the solar plexus. "We absolutely have experience," Tom started, but Lucy cut him off smoothly, her professional instincts taking over where his had completely abandoned him. "Tom's being modest, as usual. Andrews Consulting has handled multiple large-scale implementations successfully over the years. What specific concerns do you have about our capacity?" Lucy's professionalism was a shield, covering for Tom's obvious mental absence, like a bodyguard throwing herself in front of bullets. Margaret exchanged another look with her CFO, and Tom saw the decision forming in that silent conversation. "It's not about capacity on paper, Ms. Hamilton. It's about whether we can trust your firm's focus and dedication to this project." Brown Tech's CEO presented to us with a level of passion and attention to detail that was, frankly, extraordinary. She anticipated problems we hadn't even identified yet and had solutions ready before we could ask the questions. That's the kind of partner we need for something this critical to our infrastructure. Of course, Darcy had been extraordinary. She was always extraordinary when it came to work. Tom remembered that about her with painful clarity. How she'd thrown herself into every challenge with complete focus. How she never did anything halfway. How she attacked problems with the kind of relentless intelligence that made people step back in awe. He'd loved that about her once, before he'd destroyed it all. "I can assure you that we have the same level of dedication." Tom tried again, but the words felt hollow even as he said them, empty promises from an empty man. "Actually," Margaret interrupted gently but firmly, with the kind of politeness that made rejection somehow worse. "I think we have everything we need for now. We'll make our decision within the next day and be in touch with our choice." It wasn't loud or dramatic, but Tom heard the door closing anyway, heard it slam shut with the finality of a coffin lid. After they left, after the investors had gathered their materials and walked out with professional smiles that didn't reach their eyes, Lucy didn't even wait until they were outside. She turned on him right there in the restaurant, her voice low but fierce enough to scorch. "What is wrong with you? You just sat there like you weren't even present, like your mind was somewhere else entirely, while they essentially told us they're choosing someone else. Do you understand what just happened?" "I know. I'm sorry." The words were automatic, meaningless. "Sorry doesn't fix this." Lucy's voice cracked slightly, revealing the anger beneath her professional veneer. "Mitchell Tech was our future, Tom. That contract would have stabilized everything, put us on the map, given us the credibility to land even bigger deals. And you threw it away because you can't stop thinking about your ex-wife for 5 minutes. 5 minutes of focus was all you needed." They stood on the sidewalk outside the restaurant, rain starting up again like the universe was mocking them, and Tom felt the weight of his failures crushing down on him like an avalanche he couldn't escape. "I need to go home," Lucy said finally, her voice completely flat now, drained of emotion. "Alone. I need to think about whether I can do this, whether I can be with someone who's clearly still in love with someone else." "Lucy, please, don't. Just don't." She walked away, hailing a cab with the practiced efficiency of someone who'd made a decision and wouldn't be swayed. "I'll get my things from the apartment tomorrow when you're at work." Tom stood there long after she'd gone, long after her taxi had disappeared into the rain-soaked night, then did something monumentally stupid, something he knew was wrong even as he was doing it. He pulled out his phone and searched for Darcy's company, for any information he could find about the woman who'd just destroyed his evening, without even trying. Brown Tech Solutions had a sleek, modern website with Darcy's photo prominently displayed on the homepage. CEO and founder, it said, beneath her professional headshot. The About page detailed her meteoric rise in language that sounded like mythology. How she'd started the company from absolutely nothing several years ago, built it into an industry powerhouse through innovation and relentless dedication, and a refusal to accept limitations. Client testimonials praised her brilliance, her integrity, her ability to deliver results that exceeded expectations. There were case studies of impossible problems she'd solved, contracts she'd landed that should have gone to bigger firms, innovations she'd pioneered that changed how the entire industry operated. There were photos scattered throughout the site. Darcy at conferences, gesturing passionately while giving keynote speeches. Darcy accepting awards with that confident smile that said she'd known all along she would win. Darcy cutting ribbons at charity events, shaking hands with mayors and governors, standing beside CEOs of companies Tom had only dreamed of working with. In every single one, she looked powerful and confident and completely self-possessed, like someone who'd never needed anyone and never would. And in none of them, not a single photo, not one mention in any article, was there any reference to a personal life. No husband, no child, no mention of family at all. Just work, success, empire building, conquest. Darcy had clearly kept Molly completely separate from her public image, protected her daughter from the spotlight with the same fierce dedication she brought to everything else. Tom scrolled until his eyes burned and his battery warning flashed, trying to find some mention of the little girl with the sparkly boots and purple ribbons. But there was nothing, just Darcy's professional brilliance on display, polished and perfect and completely inaccessible. His phone rang, shattering his obsessive scrolling. His mother, Maxine, with her usual impeccable timing for making things worse. "Lucy called me," she said without preamble, without even a greeting. "She's very worried about you. She said you had some kind of episode at dinner with the Mitchell Tech people, that you're obsessed with your ex-wife and completely destroyed an important business opportunity." "I'm fine, Mom." Tom's voice was flat, exhausted. "You don't sound fine, Thomas. You sound like you're falling apart." There was genuine concern in Maxine's voice, which somehow made it worse. "What's going on? Why are you suddenly fixated on Darcy after all these years?" Tom stared at a photo of Darcy shaking hands with the mayor, looking like she belonged in rooms with powerful people, like she'd always belonged there. "Do you remember Darcy, my first wife?" There was a pause, and Tom could practically hear his mother's mind working, trying to understand why he was asking. "Of course I remember her, Thomas. That was years ago, ancient history. Why are you bringing her up now? Did you know she was pregnant when we divorced?" The silence on the other end of the line was deafening, absolute, the kind of silence that confirmed everything Tom had suspected. "Thomas, what are you talking about? What do you mean pregnant?" "I saw her today, with a little girl. The age is exactly right, the timing lines up perfectly." Tom's voice cracked like breaking glass. I'm almost certain I have a daughter I never knew about." "That's impossible. You would have known. She would have told you. Thomas, you're making assumptions based on coincidence and stress." "Would she have told me after I left her the way I did?" Tom laughed, but it was a broken sound, jagged and painful. "After I walked away without explanation. Why would she tell me anything?" "Thomas, you're spiraling. You don't know this child is yours. You're jumping to conclusions because you're upset about seeing her again." But Tom knew, deep in his gut, in that place where certainty lived beneath logic, he knew. Molly was his daughter, and he'd missed everything. "I have to go," he said, and hung up before his mother could argue, before she could try to rationalize away his failures with her usual efficiency. He drove home through rain that matched his mood perfectly, his mind racing with possibilities and regrets and the crushing weight of what he might have lost. When he finally made it to his empty apartment, Lucy's absence already making it feel hollow and cold, he sat in the dark and let himself feel the full, devastating weight of what he might have thrown away. Not just Darcy, though God knew that was devastating enough to break him, but a child, a daughter, a little girl who existed because of him, but who had no idea he existed. Everything. He'd lost everything, and it was entirely his own fault. Chapter 4. The Reckoning. The email arrived at dawn, painting Tom's dark bedroom in harsh blue light, and he read it 3 times before the words truly sank in and became real. "Dear Mr. Andrews, after careful consideration of all proposals, we've decided to move forward with Brown Tech Solutions for our consulting needs." Ms. Brown's proposal was significantly more comprehensive, her vision more closely aligned with our long-term goals, and her track record speaks for itself in ways that made this decision clear. "We wish you the best in your future endeavors and thank you for your time. Regards, Margaret Davies, CEO, Mitchell Tech." Tom sat in his home office, still wearing yesterday's wrinkled clothes because he hadn't bothered to change before falling asleep at his desk, and felt something inside him break cleanly in half. Not the contract itself, though losing it hurt like a physical wound. It was the casual professionalism of the rejection, the polite corporate language that made it abundantly clear his firm had never really been in the running at all. They'd been the backup option, the comparison that made Darcy's proposal look even better. Darcy had beaten him without even breaking a sweat, had crushed his biggest opportunity like it was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. His assistant called an hour later, her voice tight with barely controlled panic. "Tom, I'm seeing some very concerning emails from other clients this morning. The Johnson account wants an urgent meeting to discuss their concerns about our firm's direction. 3 others are asking pointed questions about project timelines and our capacity to deliver. What's happening? What should I tell them?" What was happening was that word traveled at light speed in their industry, and losing Mitchell Tech to a competitor made him look weak, made his firm look unstable, made everyone question whether Andrews Consulting was really the safe choice they'd thought it was. "Schedule the meetings," Tom said tiredly, his voice hollow and distant even to his own ears. "I'll handle them." But he wouldn't. He knew that with the same certainty, he knew the sun would rise. His business was circling the drain, spinning faster and faster, and he couldn't summon the energy or focus to care enough to save it. Instead, he did something profoundly reckless, something that crossed lines he knew he shouldn't cross. He drove to Mitchell Tech's headquarters and waited like a stalker in the parking lot, watching the executive entrance like some kind of deranged private investigator. Darcy's town car was parked in the section reserved for visiting executives, sleek and expensive, and mocking him with its mere existence. Tom sat in his significantly less impressive vehicle, hands gripping the steering wheel so tight his knuckles went white, and waited. Waited like the desperate man he'd become. Waited like someone who'd lost everything and had nothing left to lose. When Darcy emerged an hour later, she was laughing at something on her phone, looking triumphant and radiant and absolutely untouchable in her success. The morning sun caught her locks, made her burgundy suit shimmer, turned her into something that looked almost mythological. Tom got out of his car before his rational mind could stop him. "Darcy!" She froze mid-step, and when she turned, her expression could have frozen the sun itself, could have stopped time, could have killed with its sheer intensity of contempt. "Are you following me now?" Her voice was quiet, but deadly, carrying the kind of controlled rage that promised violence if he pushed too far. "Is that what we're doing? Stalking? Because I have to tell you, Tom, that's a really, really bad look, even for you. I just want to talk. Please, just give me 5 minutes of your time." The words tumbled out desperately, without planning, without thought, driven purely by need. "I have nothing to say to you." Darcy started walking toward her car, dismissing him like he was nothing, like he didn't even warrant the energy of sustained attention. "The little girl, Molly. She's mine, isn't she?" Darcy stopped walking, turned around slowly, deliberately, like a predator deciding whether prey was worth the effort of killing. Her eyes had gone dangerously flat, emotionless in a way that was somehow more terrifying than anger. "What did you just say to me?" "I know she's my daughter. I know it." Tom's voice cracked like breaking glass, like something shattering under pressure it couldn't withstand. "The age is exactly right. She looks like... She has my smile, Darcy. Please, just tell me the truth. I need to hear you say it." Something flickered across Darcy's face. Pain, anger, something Tom couldn't quite name but recognized as the ghost of old wounds that had never properly healed. "You want the truth? Fine, yes. She's yours biologically. Are you happy now? Does that make you feel better?" The confirmation should have felt like relief, like an answer to a question that had been eating him alive. Instead, it felt like someone had driven a knife directly between his ribs and was slowly twisting it for maximum damage. "Why didn't you tell me? When you found out you were pregnant, when you knew, why didn't you tell you?" Darcy's laugh was sharp enough to cut diamonds, bitter enough to poison oceans. "You filed for divorce, Tom. You left divorce papers on the kitchen table with a note that said, 'I can't do this anymore,' and then you vanished like smoke. You disappeared so completely I couldn't have found you if I'd wanted to. What exactly should I have told you? How was I supposed to reach you when you made it abundantly clear you wanted nothing to do with me or our life together?" "I didn't know." Tom was shouting now, not caring who heard, not caring about anything except making her understand. "I didn't know you were pregnant. If I had known, if you had told me before I left, you would have what?" Darcy cut him off with words that felt like whip cracks. "Stayed? Don't flatter yourself, Tom. Don't stand here and pretend you would have made some noble choice if only you'd had all the information. You made a choice regardless. You chose to leave. Whatever your reasons were, and I'm sure you've told yourself they were very good reasons, you left me alone with debt collectors circling like vultures and a baby on the way, and absolutely no idea how I was going to survive. I made a mistake, the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of my entire life." "Yes, you did." Darcy's voice was cold again, that professional ice that was somehow worse than her rage. And now you have to live with the consequences of that choice, just like I've had to live with raising our daughter completely alone for years with no help, no support, no co-parent to share the burden. Let me meet her properly. Let me be part of her life. Tom was begging now, all pride gone, all dignity abandoned. Please, Darcy, I'm begging you. Why should I? Darcy took a step closer, and Tom could see the fury burning in her eyes like wildfire. Give me one single good reason why I should let you anywhere near my daughter after what you did. Because she deserves to know her father. She deserves a father who wanted her from the beginning, who didn't run away when things got hard. Darcy's voice shook slightly, the first crack in her armor. You want to know the real reason I didn't tell you about the pregnancy? Because I found the bank records, Tom. I found them when I was trying to salvage our finances, trying to figure out how to survive. I know your mother paid you to leave me. I know you took money to abandon your pregnant wife, so forgive me if I don't think you deserve anything where my daughter is concerned. Tom felt like she'd punched him in the stomach, hard enough to drive all the air from his lungs. You knew? All this time you knew about the money. How long have you known? Of course I knew. I'm not stupid, Tom. I found the transfer in our account records when I was closing everything out. Darcy's eyes were bright with tears she refused to let fall. With pain, she wouldn't give him the satisfaction of showing. Your mother transferred a substantial amount to you the exact same week you filed for divorce. The exact same week. It wasn't hard to put those pieces together and understand exactly what had happened. I was desperate. I was drowning, and she offered me a way out, and I was too weak to say no. Tom was crying now, tears streaming down his face, not caring who saw, not caring about anything. I know what I did was unforgivable. I know I don't deserve anything from you, but please, Darcy, please let me at least try to know my daughter. Darcy stared at him for a long moment, and Tom saw the war playing out across her face, anger and pain, and something that might have been pity mixed with contempt. No, she said finally, the word falling like a death sentence. Not like this. Not when you're desperate and guilty and looking for absolution to make yourself feel better. If you actually want to be part of Molly's life, you need to prove you're worth knowing first. You need to become someone who deserves to breathe the same air as her. And right now, you're not even close to being that person. She got in her car and drove away with the kind of finality that left no room for argument, leaving Tom standing alone in the parking lot with tears streaming down his face and the crushing weight of his failures bearing down on him like an avalanche. He'd found his daughter, confirmed her existence, made it real. And in the process, he'd lost her all over again before he'd even had a chance to know her. The universe, it seemed, had a cruel sense of poetic justice. Chapter 5. The daughter he never knew. Tom spent the next week existing in a haze of self-destruction that felt almost deliberate. His business was hemorrhaging clients like a severed artery bleeding out. 5 more had terminated their contracts within days, all citing vague concerns about his firm's reliability and focus and ability to deliver quality work. His assistant looked at him with increasing worry and rapidly decreasing respect, like she was watching someone drown and couldn't figure out how to throw them a life preserver. Lucy still hadn't come home, and her texts, when she bothered to send them at all, were brief and cold, and carried the distinct flavor of someone who'd already moved on emotionally. But none of it mattered. None of it touched him. None of it could compete with the knowledge burning in his brain like acid. He had a daughter, Molly, his child, and he'd missed everything, every single moment of her existence. He couldn't stop thinking about her, couldn't stop his mind from cataloguing all the moments he'd lost, the sparkly rain boots that suggested a child who loved bright things, the purple ribbons that spoke of a mother who took time with her daughter's hair every morning. The way she'd smiled up at Darcy with complete trust and love, with the certainty that only children had, that they were safe and loved, and the center of someone's universe. All of it, every second, every milestone, gone, stolen, lost forever, and it was his own fault, his weakness, his choice. He found himself driving past Molly's school one afternoon, telling himself he was just curious, just wanted to see where his daughter spent her days, just needed to understand this piece of her life he'd never been part of. The school was modest, but nice, well-maintained, with a playground where children shrieked with joy during recess. Tom parked across the street, in a spot that gave him a clear view, and watched them play through the chain-link fence, trying to spot Molly among the crowd of running, laughing, playing children. There, on the swings, her distinctive braids flying behind her as she pumped her legs higher and higher with the determination of a child who refused to accept limitations. She was laughing at something another child said, her whole face lit up with pure, uncomplicated happiness that made Tom's chest physically ache. This was what he'd missed, this exact thing right here. The simple joy of childhood, the innocence that couldn't last, the laughter that came so easily when you were too young to know how cruel the world could be. He'd chosen money and an easy escape over getting to watch his daughter grow up, over hearing that laugh every day, over being the person she ran to when she was scared or hurt or excited. He sat there for 20 minutes, just watching, memorizing every detail he could see from this distance. The way she climbed the monkey bars with fierce determination, refusing to give up even when she slipped. How she shared her snack with another kid who'd forgotten theirs, displaying the kind of generosity that had to be taught, had to be modeled by a mother who clearly raised her daughter right. The way she ran with all the awkward enthusiasm of childhood, all limbs and energy and pure joy. Tom was so absorbed in watching his daughter that he didn't notice the security guard approaching until the man tapped sharply on his window with the practiced authority of someone who dealt with potential threats regularly. "Sir, can I help you with something?" The guard's tone was professionally polite, but carried an undercurrent of suspicion that set off alarm bells Tom should have heard earlier. Tom's heart jumped into his throat. I'm just watching the children at recess from your parked car." The guard's hand moved to his radio in a gesture that was probably unconscious, but deeply threatening. "Sir, I'm going to need you to move along right now. If you have legitimate business with the school, you need to come to the main office and sign in properly. Otherwise, you need to leave immediately." "Of course, I understand. I'm sorry." Tom started his car with hands that shook so badly he could barely grip the wheel. As he drove away, checking his rearview mirror compulsively, he saw the security guard writing down his license plate number with the kind of careful attention that meant Tom had just made everything infinitely worse. He'd gone from absent father to registered creep in one spectacularly stupid decision. That night, his phone stayed ominously silent. No calls from Lucy, who'd apparently decided they were done without the courtesy of actually articulating it aloud. No calls from clients looking to save their contracts or express their concerns. No calls from anyone except his mother, which he ignored with the same dedication he brought to ignoring all his other problems. He sat alone in his apartment, surrounded by the physical evidence of his failing life. Unpaid bills stacked on the counter, Lucy's empty closet like a missing tooth, the silence that came from having systematically destroyed every meaningful relationship he'd ever had, and tried to figure out how he'd ended up in this exact spot. The answer was devastatingly simple. His own choices, every single one. A clear line of bad decisions leading inevitably to this moment of absolute isolation. He'd chosen to take his mother's money instead of fighting for his marriage. Chosen to leave Darcy instead of facing his problems like an adult. Chosen to believe his own lies about it being the right decision, about her being better off without him. And now he was choosing to compound those original mistakes by lurking outside his daughter's school like some kind of dangerous stranger. Tom pulled out his laptop and did something he should have done weeks ago, something that felt like admitting defeat, but was actually the first rational decision he'd made in a long time. He searched for therapists in his area who specialized in trauma and regret and helping people who'd fundamentally broken their own lives. Dr. Sarah Rahman's profile stood out immediately. Her specialties included guilt, shame, and helping people rebuild after catastrophic mistakes. Her photo showed a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and the kind of expression that suggested she'd heard everything and wouldn't be shocked by Tom's particular brand of failure. If Darcy was right, and she absolutely was, he needed to become someone worth knowing before he had any right to ask for a place in Molly's life. He needed to understand why he'd made the choices he'd made, needed to dig into whatever weakness or fear had made taking his mother's money seem like an acceptable option. It wasn't much. It was barely anything. It was the smallest possible first step on what would clearly be a very long journey. But it was a start, and starting was better than continuing to drown in self-pity and poor decisions. The next morning, Lucy arrived at the apartment with the key Tom had given her what felt like a lifetime ago. She moved through the space with efficient silence, packing only what was definitively hers, leaving no trace of the future they'd almost built together. "I'm sorry," Tom said as she was zipping up the last suitcase, the words inadequate but necessary. "You deserve so much better than this disaster." "I did," Lucy agreed, and there was no malice in her voice, just exhausted acceptance. "But honestly, Tom, I hope you figure out what you actually need. I really do, because right now you're making everyone around you miserable, and that includes yourself." After she left, taking her engagement ring and her patience and her willingness to overlook his flaws with her, Tom sat in the quiet apartment and felt the weight of being truly, completely alone settle over him like a shroud. His phone buzzed, an unknown number that made his heart race even before he opened the message. "I know you were at Molly's school yesterday. The security guard called me. They sent me video footage. If you ever come near her school again, if you ever watch her without my explicit permission, I will get a restraining order so fast it'll make your head spin and destroy whatever microscopic chance you might have had of ever knowing her. Is that absolutely clear?" Tom typed back with fingers that wouldn't stop shaking. "I'm sorry. I just wanted to see her, to see where she goes to school. It won't happen again, I swear." The response came immediately, cold and final. "It better not. One more mistake like that, and you're done forever." Tom stared at the message, at the complete and total end of any hope for easy reconciliation, and made a decision that felt both inevitable and terrifying. He was going to sell his failing business before it completely collapsed, pay off all his remaining debts, cut his mother completely out of his life until she could acknowledge what she'd actually done without justifications or rationalizations, and he was going to become someone genuinely worthy of being Molly's father, even if it took years of therapy and work and painful self-examination. Even if Darcy never forgave him, never let him into their lives, never gave him the chance he desperately wanted, he would do the work anyway, become better anyway, change anyway. It was the only path forward that didn't end in complete destruction and the death of whatever small, fragile hope he still carried. Chapter 6. The Confrontation. Tom's phone rang at 11:30 at night, jerking him out of the first real sleep he'd had in days, and Darcy's voice came through the line shaking with rage so intense he could practically feel it burning through the speaker like fire. "I gave you one warning. One. And you couldn't even last a week before violating it." Tom sat bolt upright in bed, his heart hammering against his ribs hard enough to hurt. "Darcy, I can explain. Do you have any idea what it's like to get a call from school security?" Darcy's voice was rising, losing the icy control she usually maintained so effortlessly. Do you know what went through my mind when they told me there was video footage of a man watching my daughter from across the street? When they sent me screenshots of your car, your license plate, timestamps showing you sat there for 20 minutes just staring at children playing. I'm sorry. I know it was wrong. I just needed to see her. You just what? Darcy cut him off savagely. Wanted to see her like she's some kind of zoo animal you can observe from a distance? Like she's a curiosity instead of a real child with feelings and the right to feel safe at her own school? No, that's not what You don't get to do this, Tom. She was shouting now, really shouting, years of controlled rage finally breaking free. You don't get to lurk around my daughter's school like some kind of stalker. You don't get to watch her without permission. You don't get to make unilateral decisions about when and how you'll insert yourself into her life. I wasn't stalking. I just wanted to see what her school was like, where she spends her days, what her life looks like. Without asking, without any consideration for her safety or my feelings or the fact that you're a complete stranger to her. Darcy's voice cracked with emotion. Do you understand how violated I feel? How scared I am that you'll just show up somewhere random and confuse her or upset her or, God, I don't even know what I'm afraid of anymore. I would never hurt her. Tom was on his feet now, pacing his bedroom like a caged animal. She's my daughter, my child. I just want to know her. She's not yours. The words came out like gunfire, sharp and deadly. You lost that right when you chose money over being her father. You lost it when you walked away without looking back. Tom felt tears streaming down his face and didn't care anymore who knew he was falling apart. I didn't know about her. You keep saying I chose money over her, but I didn't even know she existed when I made that choice. If you had told me, if you had found some way to let me know you were pregnant, I couldn't tell you. Darcy's voice cracked completely, raw pain pouring out like blood from a wound that had never healed. You filed for divorce and disappeared, Tom? You vanished so completely, I had no way to reach you even if I'd wanted to. And even if I had somehow tracked you down, why would I tell the man who just abandoned me that I was carrying his child? So you could feel obligated? So you could resent both of us for trapping you? I wouldn't have resented. Yes, you would have. Darcy was crying now too, years of accumulated pain finally breaking through the armor she'd built. You took money to leave me, Tom. Your own mother paid you to divorce me like I was some kind of problem that needed solving, like I was an obstacle to your success instead of your partner. What kind of man does that? What kind of man takes actual money to abandon his wife? The shame was overwhelming, suffocating, making it hard to breathe or think or exist. A weak one. A coward. I know exactly what I am, Darcy. Do you? Her voice dropped to something quiet and infinitely more dangerous than her shouting. Do you really understand? Because from where I'm standing, you're still that same weak man making the same selfish choices, showing up at her school without permission, watching her without asking, stalking her like your desire to see her matters more than her right to feel safe. That's not love, Tom. That's not being a father. That's you being selfish again, trying to make yourself feel better without considering what's actually best for her. That's not fair, isn't it? Darcy's laugh was bitter enough to strip paint. You say you want to be her father, but you're not willing to do the actual work required. You're not willing to wait, to earn it slowly, to prove you've changed into someone who deserves to know her. You just want instant absolution handed to you because you finally feel guilty about your choices. Tom sank onto his bed, the phone pressed to his ear, and felt the full crushing weight of his failures bearing down on him like an avalanche. You're right. About all of it. Every word. I'm selfish and weak, and I've been making excuses for my behavior for years. But Darcy, please don't shut me out completely forever. I'll do whatever you want. I'll wait however long it takes. Just don't take away even the possibility of someday maybe knowing her. There was a long, terrible silence on the other end of the line. Tom could hear Darcy breathing. could imagine her standing in her expensive penthouse trying to decide his fate while their daughter slept peacefully in another room, unaware that her entire future was being negotiated. "You want to know what you have to do?" she finally said, her voice steadier now but still edged with barely controlled fury. "Here's exactly what you have to do. You stay completely away from Molly. Totally away. You don't watch her at school. You don't drive by our home trying to catch glimpses. You don't try to engineer accidental meetings at parks or stores or anywhere else. You give me the space I need to decide if and when I'll ever consider letting you into her life. Okay, I promise. I swear to you. I'm not finished." Darcy's voice turned to steel. "You also need to figure out who you actually are when you're not running from your mistakes or making excuses for your failures. You need to go to real therapy and deal with whatever fundamental weakness made you think taking that money was acceptable. You need to become someone who genuinely deserves to know her. And maybe, someday years from now, I'll consider supervised visits. But that's years away, Tom, not months, years. And only if you actually prove you've changed into someone completely different. I'll do it, all of it. Whatever it takes, however long it takes. We'll see." Darcy's voice was exhausted now, completely drained. "I've heard your promises before, and they didn't mean anything then." She hung up without saying goodbye, without offering any comfort or hope or reassurance. Tom sat in the dark of his bedroom and felt something fundamental shift inside him. Not hope exactly. He didn't deserve hope, hadn't earned it, had no right to it. But determination, a clear path forward, however long and painful and difficult it might be. His phone buzzed again almost immediately, his mother calling with her characteristic persistence. This time, he answered. "Mom," he said, his voice steady for the first time in weeks. "Did you know Darcy was pregnant when you paid me to leave her?" "Thomas, I already told you I didn't know." "Did you know?" He enunciated each word clearly, demanding honesty for possibly the first time in their entire relationship. A pause that stretched into painful silence. "No, I didn't know about any child. But you did pay me a substantial amount of money to divorce her. That part you're not denying. I was trying to save you from drowning in debt and what looked like a failed marriage that was pulling you down. You were trying to control my life because you didn't approve of my choice in wife." Tom's voice was calm, cold, absolutely certain. "You saw Darcy as beneath our family, beneath your standards, and you found a convenient way to get rid of her, and I was weak enough and desperate enough to let you do it." "Thomas, that's not entirely accurate. I was genuinely trying to help. I have a daughter I've never known because of that choice, Mom. A little girl named Molly, who doesn't even know her father exists, who will grow up with a hole in her life that I created, and that's on both of us. On you for offering the money and framing it as help, and on me for being weak enough to take it and cruel enough to use it. If you're trying to make me feel guilty about trying to help my son, I'm trying to make you face what you actually did without the comfortable lies and justifications." Tom closed his eyes, feeling tears slip down his cheeks. "What we both did. I can't have you in my life right now, Mum. Not until you can genuinely acknowledge your role in this destruction and take real responsibility for it. Not your version of trying to help, not your rationalizations about saving me. Real, honest accountability for paying your son to abandon his pregnant wife. Thomas, you're upset and not thinking clearly. When you calm down and can be rational, don't call me again until you're ready to be completely honest about what happened," Tom said quietly, and hung up before she could argue or manipulate or twist the conversation into something that let her off the hook. Then he opened his laptop and booked his first therapy appointment with Dr. Rahman for the following morning, the earliest slot she had available. It wasn't much. It was barely even the beginning of what needed to happen. But for the first time since seeing Darcy step out of that Rolls-Royce, Tom felt like he might actually have a real path forward instead of just drowning in regret and poor decisions. Even if that path led through years of painful therapy and difficult work and earning back microscopic pieces of what he'd thrown away so carelessly, at least it was a path. At least it was something concrete he could do instead of just wallowing in guilt. At least it was better than what he'd been doing, which was making everything consistently worse with every choice. Chapter 7. The Price of the Past. Tom's mother was standing outside his apartment building when he left for his first therapy appointment the next morning, and she looked older than he'd ever seen her. Maxine stood there, diminished somehow, her designer clothes hanging a bit looser on her frame, her perfectly styled hair showing more grey than he remembered seeing before, and there were dark circles under her eyes that no amount of expensive concealer could completely hide. She looked like someone who hadn't slept, who'd spent the night wrestling with demons she couldn't escape. "I don't want to talk to you," Tom said flatly, moving past her toward his car without slowing his stride. "Thomas, please." Maxine followed him, her heels clicking urgently on the pavement with a desperation he'd never heard from her before. "We need to discuss what you said last night, about the child, about your accusations, about everything you threw at me." "There's nothing to discuss." Tom unlocked his car door with deliberate calm. "I told you not to contact me until you were ready to be completely honest about what you did. Standing on my doorstep at 7 in the morning, trying to ambush me into a conversation isn't being honest, it's being manipulative, which is exactly what I expected from you." "I'm trying to understand." Maxine's voice cracked with genuine distress. "You can't just drop something like that on me, a granddaughter I never knew existed, and then cut me off completely. Thomas, I have a granddaughter. There's a child." "Yes, her name is Molly. She's in early elementary school. She likes drawing and dinosaurs and hot chocolate with whipped cream piled so high it threatens to topple over." Tom's voice was flat, deliberately emotionless, refusing to give his mother the reaction she was clearly fishing for. "And you'll never meet her because I'll never allow you anywhere near her after what you did to her mother." Maxine flinched, like he'd physically struck her across the face. "I didn't know Darcy was pregnant, Thomas. I swear to you on everything I hold sacred. If I had known there was a child involved in any of this. But you did know you were paying me a substantial amount of money to abandon my wife." Tom turned to face her fully, letting her see the anger and disappointment written across his expression. "You knew you were bribing your own son to walk away from his marriage because she wasn't good enough for you, for our family, for your standards. The pregnancy doesn't change the fundamental cruelty and manipulation of what you did. I thought I was saving you from a life of poverty and endless struggle." Maxine's composure was cracking like ice under pressure, revealing something raw and painful underneath the polished exterior. "You came to me absolutely desperate, drowning in debt that was strangling you, begging for help because you didn't know what else to do. Your business was failing spectacularly. Your marriage was clearly struggling under the weight of all that financial pressure. I gave you what I thought was a way out of an impossible situation." "At what cost?" Tom's voice rose despite his best efforts to stay calm and controlled. "At the cost of my integrity, my family, my daughter's entire childhood. You didn't save me, Mom. You destroyed me and everything good in my life. You just didn't realize it because I was too much of a coward to stand up to you and tell you no. I was protecting you from what I genuinely believed would be a life of poverty and constant struggle." "No." Tom's voice was steel now, uncompromising and certain. "You were protecting your own image and social standing. You couldn't stand having a daughter-in-law who didn't come from the right background, who didn't fit your country club standards, who wasn't connected to the right families. So you found a convenient way to get rid of her, And I let you do it because I was weak and scared and desperate for any solution that didn't require me to actually face my problems. Maxine's eyes were bright with tears she was fighting to control. That's not fair, Thomas. I loved you. I wanted what I genuinely believed was best for your future. What was actually best for me was Darcy. Tom was shouting now, not caring who heard, not caring about the neighbors peeking through curtains or the people walking past, pretending not to listen. She was the single best thing that ever happened to me. She believed in me when I had absolutely nothing to offer. She worked multiple jobs to help pay our bills when my business was failing. She held me when I cried about the mounting debt and felt like I was drowning. And you convinced me she was the problem that needed to be eliminated, that walking away was the solution to all my troubles. Well, congratulations, Mom. I walked away just like you wanted. And now I have a daughter I'll probably never truly know, and an ex-wife who can barely stand to look at me. Was it worth it? Did you get what you wanted? Maxine was crying openly now, her perfect makeup running down her cheeks in dark streams. I didn't know about the baby. Please believe me, Thomas. I would never have, if I had known she was pregnant. But you would have found some other way to manipulate the situation to get the outcome you wanted. Tom's voice was quieter now, but no less firm or certain. That's what you do. You manipulate and control people because you fundamentally can't trust anyone else to make the right choices without your guidance. Well, I'm done. I'm completely done letting you control my life or make decisions for me. What are you saying? I'm saying don't contact me again. Not by phone, not by showing up places, not through other people, until you can genuinely acknowledge what you actually did without any justifications or rationalizations or excuses. Not, I was trying to help, not, I thought it was best for you, not, I didn't know all the facts. Just the plain, honest truth. You paid your son a substantial amount of money to abandon his pregnant wife because you didn't approve of her background. Tom opened his car door with finality. When you can say that out loud and genuinely mean it, when you can take real responsibility without deflecting or making excuses, then we can talk. Until then, stay completely away from me. Thomas, please don't do this. He got in his car and drove away, watching her in the rear-view mirror, standing alone on the sidewalk, looking lost and smaller than he'd ever seen her, and he felt something shift in his chest that might have been grief, or might have been relief, or might have been both tangled together inseparably. The therapy session with Dr. Rahman was absolutely brutal in ways Tom hadn't anticipated. She was a woman in her 50s with kind eyes that saw through every lie and zero tolerance for the comfortable stories people told themselves to avoid facing hard truths. Tom had barely started explaining his situation, still trying to frame it in ways that made him look less terrible, when she cut him off with surgical precision. So you took a substantial amount of money from your mother to divorce your pregnant wife, didn't contact her for years afterward, just recently discovered you have a child, and now you want me to help you feel better about all of these choices. That's not, yes, but it's more complicated than, Mr. Andrews, I'm not here to make you feel better about the choices you've made. Dr. Rahman's voice was gentle, but absolutely firm. I'm here to help you understand why you made those specific choices and how to make genuinely better ones going forward. Are you actually ready for that kind of difficult work? Tom swallowed hard, feeling exposed and vulnerable in ways he hadn't experienced in years. Yes, I think so. I hope so. Good. Then let's start with the money. Why did you actually take it? And I want the real answer, not the comfortable story you've been telling yourself. The hour that followed was excruciating in the most productive way possible. Dr. Rahman dug into every rationalization, every comfortable excuse, every self-serving lie Tom had been telling himself for years to avoid facing what he'd actually done. By the end of the session, he felt flayed completely open, raw and exposed, and unable to hide behind the stories that had protected him from the full weight of his guilt. "Your homework," Dr. Rahman said as they finished, handing him a blank notebook that felt heavy with significance, "is to write down every single specific thing you lost when you made the choice to take that money and leave. Not vague concepts, not what you think you lost. Actual, specific, concrete things with names and moments attached. Bring it to our next session." Tom went home and started writing with a pen that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. He wrote until his hand cramped painfully, until he couldn't see through the tears that wouldn't stop falling, until the list filled pages and pages and threatened to consume the entire notebook. Molly's first breath. The sound of it, the reality of it, the miracle of a new life beginning. Molly's first word. Was it mama? Was it something else? I'll never know. Molly's first steps. The wobbling, the determination, the triumph when she made it across the room. Darcy's hand in mine during labor. The fear and excitement and shared experience of bringing our daughter into the world together. Midnight feedings, where I could have been there to help, to share the exhaustion and the quiet beauty of a sleeping baby. First day of school. The outfit Darcy probably agonized over choosing, the photo she took alone, the excitement and nervousness I should have been there to witness. Every birthday, every candle blown out without me there to see it. Every holiday, Christmas mornings and Easter egg hunts and Halloween costumes I never got to help choose. Every scraped knee I should have kissed better, every nightmare I should have soothed away, every achievement I should have celebrated. Every bedtime story I should have read, every song I should have sung, every tiny hand that should have held mine. Every drawing that should have gone on my refrigerator, every school performance I should have attended, every parent-teacher conference where I should have been present. Every moment of every single day for years, all of it, everything. By the time Tom finished, he understood with devastating clarity exactly what he'd lost. Not just Darcy, though that alone was catastrophic enough to break him. Not just Molly, though missing her entire childhood was a wound that would never truly heal. But the man he could have been, the father he should have been, the partner Darcy deserved, the life they could have built together if he'd been brave enough to fight for it instead of taking the easy way out his mother offered. Everything. He'd lost absolutely everything that mattered. His business officially collapsed 2 weeks later. Tom sold what remained of it to a competitor for a fraction of what it should have been worth, paid off all his outstanding debts with what was left, and found himself unemployed and alone in a city that suddenly felt too big and too empty. He used the newfound time to go to therapy twice a week instead of once, to attend support groups for men struggling with guilt and regret and the weight of choices they couldn't undo, to slowly, painfully, learn who he actually was when he wasn't running from his mistakes or hiding behind professional success or taking shortcuts his mother offered. And he waited. He didn't contact Darcy or try to engineer meetings, didn't drive by her office or Molly's school or anywhere else they might be, didn't try to force his way into their lives through manipulation or persistence. He just worked on himself with the kind of dedication he should have brought to his marriage years ago, and he waited. Months passed in this strange limbo. Then one morning, a text arrived from an unknown number that made his heart stop completely. "I've been watching. I see you sold your business. I see you're in therapy regularly. I see you haven't tried to contact us or show up anywhere we might be. That's good. That's the bare minimum of what I needed to see. Keep doing exactly that. When I'm ready, if I'm ever ready, I'll reach out to you. Don't respond to this message." Tom read it 100 times, 200 times, memorizing every word until he could recite it perfectly. Then he did exactly what Darcy asked and didn't respond, didn't try to start a conversation, didn't push for more than she was willing to give. He just kept working on himself and waited with a patience he was slowly learning to cultivate. Because that's all he could do. That's all he had any right to do. And maybe, someday, if he worked hard enough and changed deeply enough and proved himself consistently enough over a long enough period of time, it would be enough to earn even the smallest place in his daughter's life. Maybe. Chapter 8. The Slow Thaw. The text that changed everything came 6 months after Darcy's warning, arriving on a Saturday morning when Tom was having coffee and actively trying not to think about what Molly might be doing at that exact moment. 1 hour. Park on 5th Street, near the playground. Tomorrow at 10 a.m. Don't be late, don't bring anything. Don't expect her to know who you are. Don't make me regret this. Tom's hands shook so violently he almost dropped his phone, almost spilled coffee all over himself in his shock. He read the message over and over until the words stopped making sense, until he had to close his eyes and breathe deeply to convince himself it was real. He showed up 45 minutes early the next day, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he thought it might actually break through. The park was beautiful in the morning light, trees showing the first hints of autumn color, children already playing on the equipment despite the early hour, the world continuing on completely indifferent to the fact that Tom's entire life was about to fundamentally change. Then he saw them walking toward him across the grass. Darcy looked exactly the same, powerful, composed, radiating the kind of controlled strength that made people instinctively straighten their spines. Molly skipped beside her mother, and Tom felt his breath catch painfully in his chest. His daughter wore overalls covered in paint stains that suggested creative projects, her hair pulled into 2 ponytails that were already coming loose and tilting sideways in the way children's hairstyles inevitably did. She looked absolutely perfect in every possible way. "Hi," Molly said when they reached him, tilting her head in that achingly familiar gesture Tom recognized as his own unconscious habit. "Mommy says your name is Tom, and we're going to hang out for a little while today." "That's right." Tom's voice came out rough and hoarse, barely functional. "It's really nice to meet you properly, Molly. We already met, though, at the hotel, when it was raining and you looked really surprised." Molly plopped down on the grass without any hesitation or fear. "Remember, you said my mommy's name and looked like you'd seen something scary." "I remember that day very clearly." How could he possibly forget the moment his entire world had shattered and reformed? Darcy sat on a nearby bench without saying a word to Tom, her body language making it abundantly clear she was watching every single move he made, ready to intervene at the absolute first sign of trouble or anything that might upset or confuse Molly. "Do you like bugs?" Molly asked, with the sudden topic changes only children could navigate smoothly. "Because I found this really cool beetle last week and I wanted to keep it in a jar, but Mommy said it needed to be outside with its family, which I guess makes sense because I wouldn't want to be kept in a jar away from my mommy." "That sounds like a very wise decision your mother made," Tom managed, fighting to keep his voice steady. "Yeah, I guess." Molly started pulling up grass blades one by one, examining each with intense scientific focus. "Do you have any kids?" The question was completely innocent, absolutely devastating in its simplicity. "No, I don't." "Oh, well, kids are pretty cool. I'm a kid, so I know all about it." Molly grinned at him, gap-toothed and perfect, and utterly unaware she was destroying him with every word. They spent the hour talking about dinosaurs. Molly had very strong opinions about which ones were most interesting, and favorite colors and whether dogs or cats made better pets. Molly chattered easily once she warmed up to him, her hands moving in those exaggerated gestures children used when they were really excited about something, her laughter bright and frequent and absolutely beautiful. Tom absorbed every detail, like a drowning man finally reaching the surface and gasping for air. The way she wrinkled her nose when she was concentrating hard on something. The gap in her smile, where she'd recently lost a tooth and couldn't stop running her tongue over the space. The way she said "actually" with complete and utter seriousness before delivering some piece of childhood wisdom that made perfect sense in her universe. When the hour was up, far too soon, impossibly fast, Darcy called Molly over to where she'd been working on her laptop. "Did you have fun, baby?" "Yeah, Tom knows about dinosaurs too, and he doesn't think cats are automatically better than dogs, so he's okay, I guess." Molly looked up at Tom with those big eyes that were so like Darcy's it physically hurt. "Will you come back next week?" Tom looked at Darcy over Molly's head, silently asking permission, hardly daring to hope. She gave the smallest nod, barely perceptible. "I would absolutely love to come back," Tom said, meaning it with every fibre of his being. "Yay!" Molly waved enthusiastically as they walked away, already chattering to Darcy about something new. The visits continued with clockwork regularity. Every single week, the same park, the same bench, the same precious hour that Tom lived for all week. He showed up early every single time without fail, bringing nothing but his complete presence and absolute focus on Molly. He learned that she loved purple more than any other color, hated broccoli with a passion that seemed almost philosophical, wanted to be a paleontologist when she grew up so she could dig up dinosaur bones and name them after herself. He learned her laugh in all its variations, learned her moods and how to read them, learned the way she processed the world with a child's logic that was both hilarious and profound, and slowly, painfully slowly, over weeks that became months, Molly began to genuinely trust him. She started saving drawings specifically to show him during their visits, keeping them safe all week. Started planning conversations, making mental lists of things she wanted to tell him about. Started lighting up with genuine joy when she saw him waiting in their spot. Started running toward him instead of walking. Darcy watched it all with an expression Tom couldn't fully read, couldn't interpret, couldn't quite understand. Sometimes she worked on her laptop during their visits, typing away at proposals and emails. Sometimes she just watched them interact with an expression that might have been pain, or might have been something else entirely, but she never left them alone, and Tom didn't blame her for that caution. Then one week, Molly got sick. Tom showed up for their regular visit to find Darcy in the hospital waiting room instead of the park, her face drawn with exhaustion and barely controlled terror that parents knew when their children were suffering. "What happened?" Tom asked, his heart immediately in his throat, fear flooding through him. "Is she okay?" "High fever that wouldn't break no matter what I did." Darcy's hands were shaking visibly in her lap. "They're running tests now. It's probably just a virus, nothing serious, but I needed to be absolutely sure she was okay." Tom sat down beside her without asking permission, without even thinking about whether it was appropriate or wanted. "Can I stay?" "Why would you want to?" Darcy's voice was hollow with exhaustion. "Because you shouldn't have to be alone right now. Because she's—" Tom stopped, choosing his words carefully. "Because I care deeply about what happens to her." Darcy looked at him then, really looked at him for the first time in months, and something in her expression shifted just slightly, like ice beginning to crack. "She asked for you before we came here. Wanted to make sure she wouldn't miss your visit. Wanted to know if you'd still come next week even though she couldn't come today." The words hit Tom like a physical blow, stealing his breath completely. "I'll always come. Every single week without fail. I promise you that, Darcy." They sat in that waiting room for hours that felt like days, not talking much, just existing in parallel while doctors came and went with updates. When the pediatrician finally came out and said it was just a virus, nothing serious, Molly would be fine with rest and fluids and time, Darcy actually sagged with relief so profound it looked like her bones had turned to water. Tom brought them both soup from the hospital cafeteria. Terrible watery soup that tasted like cardboard, but Darcy ate it anyway because she'd been too worried to eat anything all day. "Thank you," she said quietly, not looking at him. "For staying. For being here. Of course. You've been consistent." Darcy still wasn't looking at him, focusing on her soup instead. 6 months of showing up every single week, never late, never asking for more than I offered, never pushing boundaries. I notice things like that. I pay attention. I meant what I said. I'll wait, however long it takes. Darcy was quiet for a long moment that stretched into something meaningful. "I'm starting to believe you might actually mean that you might have actually changed." It wasn't forgiveness, it wasn't even close to forgiveness, but it was acknowledgement, recognition, the smallest possible thaw in the ice that had frozen solid between them. And that night, when Tom went home to his small apartment, he downsized significantly after selling his business. He felt something he hadn't felt in longer than he could remember. Hope, real, solid, genuine hope. The kind built on months and months of consistently showing up and being present and proving himself one supervised hour at a time. It was fragile and tentative and conditional on his continued good behavior, but it was real and growing and possibly sustainable. And for now, for this moment, that was enough. Chapter 9. Building something new. The leaves had changed colors and fallen and changed again before Molly asked the question that shifted everything. They were in their usual spot in the park, and Molly was demonstrating her newly perfected cartwheel. Months and months of dedicated practice had finally paid off. She executed it with precision, landed perfectly with her arms up in triumph like an Olympic gymnast, and beamed at both Tom and Darcy with pure, uncomplicated joy. "Did you see that? Did you see it?" "That was amazing," Tom cheered with genuine enthusiasm, meaning every word. Darcy applauded from her bench, pride written all over her face in ways she couldn't hide. "You've been practicing so hard, baby girl. I'm so incredibly proud of you." After Molly ran off to practice some more, to see if she could do 3 in a row, she came back and plopped down beside Tom, slightly breathless and flushed with exertion. "Can I ask you something kind of important?" "Always. You can ask me anything." "How come you spend time with me every single week, but you don't really spend time with my mommy?" Molly tilted her head in that way she had, studying him with those eyes that seemed to see more than most children should be able to see. "I mean, you're always nice to each other and you don't fight or anything, but you talk like you're being really, really careful not to make each other upset." Kids saw absolutely everything, noticed patterns adults thought they were hiding. Tom should have expected this question eventually. "Your mum and I have what's called a complicated history," he said carefully, picking each word like stepping on stones across a river. "We used to know each other a long time ago, before you were born, and some things happened that hurt both of us pretty badly. Now we're trying to figure out how to be friends again, but that takes time when people have hurt each other." "What's a complicated history mean exactly?" "It means we used to be close, and then we weren't anymore. And now we're trying to find a way to be in each other's lives again because of you." Molly absorbed this with the gravity children brought to truly important revelations. Did you hurt her feelings really bad? The question was innocent, devastatingly accurate, impossible to deflect. "Yes, very, very badly." "Did you say you're sorry?" "Many, many times." "Mommy says sometimes sorry isn't enough, though." Molly looked at him with complete seriousness. "She says you have to actually show people you're sorry by doing better and being better, not just saying words. Are you being better?" Tom felt tears prick his eyes, fought desperately to keep his voice steady. "I'm trying really, really hard to be better every single day." "Good." Molly patted his hand with her small one, the gesture so tender it nearly broke him completely. "Because I like you a whole lot. I want you to keep coming forever and ever and ever." After Molly ran off to play on the swings, Darcy came over and sat down on the grass beside Tom for the first time in all their months of visits. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching Molly laugh with pure joy. "She's getting really attached to you," Darcy said quietly, her voice carrying both observation and warning. "I know, I can see it. If you're going to disappoint her at some point, if you're going to decide this is too hard or too complicated and you want to walk away again, do it now, right now, before it gets any harder for her to lose you." Tom turned to look at her directly. "I'm not going to disappoint her. I promise you with everything I am, everything I've become. I'll show up for her for as long as she wants me to." "People break promises all the time, Tom. I have personal experience with that. I know I have absolutely no right to ask you to trust me or my word." Tom's voice was steady, despite the emotion threatening to choke him. "I know I completely destroyed any faith you might have had in me, but I'm genuinely not the same person who took that money and walked away. I've been in intensive therapy for over a year now. I've dealt with why I made those choices, what weakness or fear drove me. I've become someone fundamentally different, someone better, I hope." Darcy was quiet for a long time, so long Tom thought she might not respond at all. "Why does it matter so much now? Why are you willing to put in all this exhausting work now when you weren't willing to fight for us then?" "Because I missed absolutely everything," Tom said with brutal honesty. Her first smile, her first word, her first steps, all of it. Every milestone, every moment, every memory, gone forever. I can never, ever get any of that back no matter how badly I want to. But maybe I don't have to miss the rest of her life. Maybe I can actually be there for her going forward, even if I can't change or fix the past." "And what about me?" Darcy's voice was barely audible, vulnerable in a way he'd never heard from her. "Where do I fit into all of this redemption you're working so hard on?" Tom looked at her, really looked at her, seeing past the power and success and armor to the exhaustion beneath, the wariness that never quite faded completely. "Honestly, I don't know. I know I don't deserve your forgiveness for what I did. I know that what I did was fundamentally unforgivable. But Darcy, you need to understand something. When I saw you step out of that Rolls-Royce that day, it wasn't just shock at your incredible success. It was seeing everything I had thrown away, not the money or the power or the business empire you'd built. You, the woman who loved me when I had absolutely nothing to offer, the woman who believed in me when I didn't believe in myself, the woman who was my true partner in every way that mattered. I destroyed all of that, and I have to live with it every single day." Darcy's hands were clenched tightly in her lap, her knuckles white with tension. "You broke me, Tom. When you left, when I found those divorce papers with that cold little note, I genuinely didn't think I would survive the pain. I was pregnant and alone and drowning in debt and terror, and I had absolutely no idea how I was going to make it through the next day, let alone raise a child completely by myself. Do you have any real concept of what that felt like? The absolute despair?" "No," Tom said with complete honesty. "I can't even begin to imagine it. And I'm so sorry. I don't know if I can ever trust you again," Darcy whispered, her voice breaking. "I don't know if I can ever let myself be that vulnerable with you. If I can ever believe that you won't just walk away again when things get difficult. I'm not asking you to trust me. Not yet. Maybe not ever." Tom's voice was gentle, careful. "I'm just asking for the chance to prove over time, through consistent actions instead of empty words, that I've genuinely changed into someone different." They sat in silence, watching Molly laugh with abandon on the swings, watching the future they might somehow be able to build together if they were both brave enough. "She has your laugh," Darcy said suddenly. "Did you notice that? It's one of the things that makes all of this so impossibly hard. Every single day I see you in her, your laugh, Your smile, the way you both tilt your head exactly the same way when you're thinking about something, and every single day I have to consciously decide whether to hate that or accept it. What do you usually decide? Both. Neither. I honestly don't know anymore. Darcy rubbed her eyes with exhaustion. This whole thing would be so much easier if I could just hate you cleanly, completely, without any complications. But you can't? No. She finally looked at him, and her eyes were full of pain and anger and something else he was afraid to name, afraid to hope for. And that's the absolute worst part, Tom. After everything you did, after all the pain and betrayal and years of raising her completely alone, I can't hate you the way I should. I can't hate you the way you probably deserve, and I genuinely hate myself for that weakness. Before Tom could respond, before he could even begin to process what she'd just admitted, Molly came running over with flushed cheeks and wild excitement. "Mommy! Tom! Can we all get ice cream together? Please, please, please!" Darcy and Tom looked at each other, and something passed between them. A question, an offer, a tentative possibility of something more than just supervised visits and careful distance. "Okay," Darcy said quietly, her eyes still locked on Tom's. "We can get ice cream, all three of us, together." Molly cheered with pure joy, grabbing both their hands simultaneously, trying to drag them toward the ice cream truck with the strength that only excited children possessed. And for just a brief, perfect moment, walking through the park with his daughter between them and her small hands gripping theirs, Tom let himself imagine what it might actually be like if this could somehow be their future. It was a dangerous thought to entertain, a fragile thought that could shatter so easily, a thought built on months and months of showing up and being present and proving himself worthy, one careful day at a time. But after everything he'd lost, after all the pain he'd caused, after the long journey of becoming someone better, maybe, just maybe, hope wasn't completely impossible. Maybe they actually could build something entirely new from the ruins of what he'd destroyed so carelessly. Maybe redemption was actually real and achievable, not just a fantasy he'd invented to make himself feel better about his choices. Chapter 10. The Choice. Molly's school play was complete chaos wrapped in construction paper, held together with glue sticks and childhood dreams. Tom sat in the packed auditorium surrounded by parents wielding cameras and proud grandparents and squirming siblings, his heart hammering so violently he thought it might actually break through his chest. Darcy had texted him that morning, just the bare facts, no extra words or unnecessary emotion. "Molly's school play tonight, 7 p.m. She specifically asked if you wanted to come." When Molly appeared on stage wearing a bunny costume that was at least 3 sizes too large, her ears flopping sideways at a comical angle that made the audience chuckle, she scanned the crowd until she found him. Her whole face lit up with pure, uncomplicated joy, and she waved enthusiastically, completely breaking character and not caring even slightly about the play anymore. Tom waved back, not caring that every parent around him was chuckling at the exchange, not caring about anything except his daughter's happiness. The play was objectively terrible in every technical sense and absolutely perfect in every way that mattered. Molly forgot half her lines, stepped on another kid's costume tail during a crucial scene, and at one point just stood there grinning at the audience with no attempt whatsoever to pretend she was a forest creature. But Tom didn't take his eyes off her for a single second, didn't miss a moment of her performance. After the final bow, Molly came running off stage and launched herself at both Tom and Darcy simultaneously, her bunny ears flying off in the process and landing somewhere behind them. "Did you see me? Did I do good?" "You were absolutely amazing, baby girl," Darcy said, catching her and holding her tight. "The best bunny I've ever seen in my entire life," Tom added, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't even trying to hide anymore. Molly beamed up at both of them with pride radiating from every pore. Then she asked with the devastating innocence only children possessed, "Are you my daddy?" The world stopped spinning on its axis. Tom's breath caught in his throat. Darcy's face went very still, very careful. The other parents nearby suddenly found their phones extremely interesting and pretended they weren't listening. Tom looked at Darcy, silently asking for permission to tell the truth, his heart pounding so hard he thought he might pass out. She closed her eyes briefly, took a shaky breath, and nodded with resignation and acceptance. Tom knelt down so he was at Molly's eye level, so he could look her directly in the eyes when he said the truest thing he'd ever said in his life. "Yes, sweetheart, I am your daddy." Molly processed this with that strange, calm acceptance children sometimes had for life-altering information. "Oh, how come you weren't here before we started having our park days?" It was the hardest question anyone had ever asked him, and she deserved the most honest answer he could possibly give. "Because I made a terrible, terrible mistake," Tom said, his voice breaking but staying steady. "I wasn't there when your mommy needed me most. I wasn't there when you were born. I wasn't there for any of your birthdays or holidays or important moments. And I'm so, so sorry for all of that. I can never make up for missing all that time with you, for not being there from the beginning, but I'm here now, and I'll be here for as long as you want me in your life." Molly looked at him with complete seriousness, then turned to her mother. "Are you still sad at him, Mommy?" Darcy's eyes were bright with tears she was fighting desperately to control. "I was sad for a very long time, baby." "Are you still sad now?" "Sometimes, but less than I used to be." Darcy's voice was gentle, honest. "It's complicated." Molly nodded, like this made perfect sense in her understanding of the world. Then she did something Tom would remember for the rest of his life. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and whispered directly in his ear, "I'm really glad you came back." Tom held his daughter, really held her for the first time, knowing exactly who she was and who he was to her, and felt something break wide open in his chest, releasing years of accumulated pain and guilt and grief. Later, after Molly had fallen asleep in Darcy's car, completely exhausted from the excitement and emotion of the evening, Tom and Darcy stood in the school parking lot under harsh fluorescent lights that made everything feel surreal and otherworldly. "Thank you," Tom said quietly, "for letting me be here tonight, for letting me tell her the truth. She deserved to know." Darcy wrapped her arms around herself protectively. "I can't honestly say I'll ever completely forgive you for what you did. Taking that money, walking away when I needed you most, it broke something fundamental in me that might never fully heal. I understand that completely. But," Darcy looked up at him, and her expression was complicated, layered with emotions he couldn't fully read. "I've watched you this past year, how you show up every single week without fail. How you listen to her ramble about dinosaurs like it's the most important conversation in the world. How you look at her like she hung the moon and stars. She did. I know. I can see that truth in everything you do." Darcy took a shaky breath. "And maybe that's enough for now. Not forgiveness, not love. But maybe we can build something entirely new. For Molly's sake." Tom felt hope and fear war in his chest. What kind of something? Real co-parents. Actual co-parents who work together, not whatever careful dance we've been doing for months. Darcy met his eyes directly. She deserves to have both of us genuinely in her life. School events and doctor's appointments and birthday parties and all the normal things children should have. I would love that more than anything in this world. But you need to understand something crucial. Darcy's voice was firm, leaving no room for misunderstanding. This is about Molly and what's best for her, not about us or our history. I understand completely. Darcy studied his face carefully. Do you really? Because I need you to truly hear me. I've built a good life without you, a successful life, a life I'm proud of. I don't need you for anything except being a father to our daughter." "I know." Tom's smile was sad but genuine, and honestly, I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm proud that you survived what I did to you and came out stronger and more successful than I ever imagined possible. "But Molly deserves her father," Darcy continued, "so I'm willing to really try this, really commit to co-parenting properly. But if you hurt her, if you disappoint her, if you prove that you haven't actually changed, I won't." "What about—" Darcy stopped, bit her lip, looked away. "What about being worthy of being my—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "Your what?" Tom's heart was pounding. She looked away, shaking her head. "Nothing. Forget I said anything." But Tom had heard the unspoken word hanging between them in the fluorescent-lit parking lot. Partner, friend, something more than just co-parents navigating custody arrangements and school events. "I don't expect anything from you beyond letting me be Molly's father," Tom said gently, carefully. "Anything else, if there's ever anything else between us, that's entirely up to you. I'll wait however long it takes, or forever, if that's what you need. I'm not going anywhere." Darcy was quiet for so long, Tom thought she wouldn't respond at all. Then she said, so softly, he almost missed it, "I never stopped loving you. That's what makes this absolutely unbearable. I should hate you completely and cleanly. I want to hate you. But when I see you with her, when I see how hard you're trying to be better, I don't know what to do with these feelings anymore." Tom's breath caught. "We don't have to figure it all out tonight. We can take this as slowly as you need, as slow as it takes to feel safe." "Slow," Darcy repeated, testing the word. "I can do slow." She turned toward her car, where Molly slept peacefully, then paused and looked back. "Tomorrow morning. Molly has soccer practice at 9. If you want to come, I'll be there," Tom said without hesitation. Darcy smiled, small, tentative, but completely genuine. "I thought you might say that." She walked to her car, and Tom watched her go, watched her check on their sleeping daughter with such tenderness it made his chest ache. As she drove away, Molly's face peaceful in the back seat, Tom felt something he hadn't felt in years. Real hope, solid hope, the kind built on a year of therapy and showing up and proving himself one difficult day at a time. He'd missed so much. Years of Molly's life he could never reclaim. He'd destroyed his marriage through weakness and cowardice. He'd hurt Darcy in ways that might never fully heal, wounds that would always leave scars. But tomorrow he'd be at soccer practice, and the day after that, maybe they'd have dinner together. And slowly, carefully, painfully, they might build something new from the ruins he'd created. It wasn't redemption. That felt too easy, too complete, too much like absolution he hadn't fully earned. It wasn't a perfect happy ending tied with a neat bow. It was messier than that, more complicated, more real, but it was a beginning. A second chance he'd done nothing to deserve but everything to earn through consistent action. And as Tom drove home through streets that didn't feel quite so empty anymore, he made a promise to himself and to Molly and to Darcy. He would show up, every single day, in every way that mattered, for however long it took and whatever it required. He couldn't change the past or undo his mistakes, but maybe, just maybe, he could build a future worth having. One day at a time, one visit at a time, one moment at a time. That would have to be enough, and somehow, miraculously, it was.